Okay, fantastic.
Stage is yours, Edan. Great to see you.
Oh, thank you. Although I actually don't need this, thanks. Johannesburg, South Africa, 1989. 20 years before the year of Satoshi. I was a little kid, woken up by a lot of noise. There was a huge commotion in my house, and I tiptoed out of my bedroom and tried to peek around into the living room to see what was going on. And at the time, I had no idea what was going on. But what had happened was that part of my family had been declared terrorists by the apartheid government of South Africa because they were associated with the ANC. And my uncle and his wife had arrived at our house, and they were going to be taking our car, and they were going to drive it through the night all the way to the border in Botswana in order to get out of South Africa without being detected, without being stopped, and never to return. Now, for me, all of that politics was beyond my conception. I was being shielded for it. But it did introduce me to my first career, which was as a gold smuggler. Because starting at the age of 9 and through to the age of 11, my family needed to get their money out of South Africa, which had substantial capital controls. And the way that we did it was that my mother was buying Krugerrands, these gold coins, sewing them into my clothes, would take me to the airport, to Jan Smuts, and then I would fly from Johannesburg to Tel Aviv, where I would be met with family, and they would, lighten my load. And so sometimes I like to joke that I've been a Bitcoiner since I was 9, because it's very deeply embedded in me the need for us to have unstoppable, uncensorable money. Many years later, Pittsburgh, 2011, 2 years after the year of Satoshi, I was dusting off the snow. I had just come in from a blizzard outside. This is not South Africa anymore. And I'm deep in the bowels of a Gothic building where I'm in part of the biology department of Carnegie Mellon University. And I'm doing what I did every single morning. I'm reading some articles and papers, and suddenly my hand starts shaking and I spill my coffee all over my computer. It was the first time that I came across the Satoshi white paper, and it blew my mind. Because in that paper, different people have seen different things, but what I saw was a description of digital, unstoppable, uncensorable money. Something which I immediately understood was going to be of huge value to people around the world. And very soon, I decided that I wanted to play some role in taking unstoppable, uncensorable money and making it mainstream, helping put it into the hands of as many people as possible. And so, just a few months later, I was in an entirely more sunny environment. I was working at a company called Zynga in San Francisco. And I'd gone to work for Zynga because at the time, Zynga was the company that understood better than anyone else how you mainstream digital currency. They had become, overnight, one of the biggest games companies in the world, and they did it by making games mainstream. In fact, our primary demographic was middle-aged housewives living in the Midwest of the United States of America, who were paying hundreds of dollars every month in microtransactions so that they could continue feeding their virtual cows. So Zynga really knew how to do this. And my focus in managing some of the games at Zynga and ultimately managing the real money gaming was to focus on friction. Because the key thing that I learned there was that if you want something to be mainstream, if you want massive adoption, the most important thing is automatic habits. And there are two kinds. The minority is creating new types of automatic habits, but far more important is making sure that you don't stop people from behaving in ways which are automatic. Because if somebody stops to think, then they stop. And people who stop to think are people who do not adopt. And I got an amazing realization. This understanding of how important friction was to adoption was made clear to me 2 years later. Honduras, 2013. I was part of a small group of people who were working with the Honduran government to try and change, and eventually succeeded in changing their constitution. My particular focus was on creating the environment for currency competition. My dream was that there would be a country anywhere in the world where cryptocurrencies could be viewed as legitimate currencies. And in Honduras, we managed to change the constitution to allow certain zones to do this. But while I was traveling around Honduras, I saw something fascinating, something very, very surprising. You see, Honduras is a uniquely troublesome country. And one of the ways that you can see this is that between 20 and 25% of the entire GDP of the country comes in the form of remittances, money sent from people back to their families from one country in one currency. 25% of the money that comes to Honduras is in the form of remittances in US dollars. And this is particularly important, not so much in the cities, but in the rural areas, in villages across Honduras where pretty much everyone who is of working age has already left, and the people who are receiving funds, the grandmothers, the churches, the cousins, the school fees are all paid for with these remittances. And so you would expect that given the choice between the money I have, which is stable-ish and well-known USD, versus the money that I'm supposed to use, Lempira, which only works in Honduras, it is constantly being inflated, people would choose the dollars. That's the money they actually get. But they don't. They spend a lot of money to change their dollars into Lempira. And the reason for this is because money is the original social network. We're not on Facebook because we love it, but we're all on Facebook. We're on Facebook because our friends are on Facebook, and they're on Facebook because we're on Facebook. The same thing, but in a far more powerful and ancient way, money has created the automatic habit of us wanting to use and only being able to use the money that our neighbors use. So in Honduras, it's the Lempira. Here, it's the euro. In the United States, it's the dollar. And in South Africa, it's the rand. In fact, even countries like Venezuela or Zimbabwe, which have basically seen their money go to nothing, even today, in Venezuela, the bolivar is what you will use in every single store. It's what you will lend your friends money in. It is the currency of the country, despite everything. That's the power of network effects in money. And so it became clear to me that if we wanted Bitcoin and cryptocurrency to be mainstream, we needed to link it with existing familiar coins, with dollars, with euros. And so my company, I founded a company called Epiphyte, and what we started doing is focusing on how we can connect with banks and make it seamless, frictionless for people to convert from their existing currencies into Bitcoin and out into another existing currency without even knowing that they're doing it. So, on Goat Island in 2014, I was sitting in a very, very strange place. It's an island, a gorgeous, huge island in the middle of Sydney Harbour in Australia. And it's completely wild. It's like a beautiful nature reserve, except for a few buildings which are owned by the owner. And the thing is, you can see the entire skyline of Sydney, but nobody's allowed on Goat Island, except people who receive permission from the owner. And who is the owner? It's not the city. It's not the municipality, it's not the government of Australia, it's the 5th largest bank in the world because, banks like to own things. So this island belongs to the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, and I was sitting there with the Chief Information Officer and part of his team, and people in white gloves were serving us lunch as we looked at the boats going by because they can. And what we were talking about is how the bank can become involved in cryptocurrencies. And Commonwealth Bank of Australia became the first customer for Epiphyte. The idea was we would convert Australian dollars into Bitcoin and then be able to send them anywhere in the world, reconvert them into the destination currency, and do the whole thing very, very inexpensively and almost instantly. And after that, Barclays and Visa and other large banks became our customers. And for the next 2 years, we were doing pilots with some of the largest financial institutions in the world. And what we discovered was that our system worked. It was great, and no one was using it. Because the banks They make a lot of money from the system as it currently is, and so they had no interest to change. And so we pivoted, and we went for their customers instead. We started going after the payments companies or the remittance companies who use the bank's services every single day. And our volumes that were going through our system started to grow 20% month over month. London, 2017, I just get back from my first vacation in 4 years. I was in the jungles of Colombia. I come back to London quite sick, and I find 2 letters waiting for me. For the 2 banks who we had partnered with in the UK, telling us that in light of our increased and unexpected growth, they're asking us to stop working with them. Now, I called the CEO of one of these banks, so we had a very close relationship, and I asked him what was going on, and he told me that they were under pressure from an even bigger bank. JP Morgan said that they wouldn't clear any of their USD transactions if they continued working with us. This is just as the CEO of JP Morgan was making his statements against Bitcoin. This was very, very heartbreaking for me. I'd spent years working on this project. But it made me realize something. We cannot, if we want to mainstream these cryptocurrencies, rely on the banks, but we also can't rely on Bitcoin or Ethereum or these exotic currencies to do it. And so what we need are what people are calling stablecoins, but I think are maybe better referred to as familiar coins. A way to take things like dollars and euros and put them onto the blockchain. The problem is how. And so that's something that we, at my new company, Reserve, and a number of other companies, in fact, many companies are working on now. There are basically 3 primary approaches that have been taken. One is to create fiat currency-backed tokens. That's like Tether. So there's bank funds in an account somewhere, and they're represented on the blockchain. The other is to collateralize a smart contract with something like Ethereum and create tokens that are supposed to represent dollars. And the third is to just algorithmically create dollars and reduce their number if the price fluctuates above $1 and increase their number if the other way around. If the price fluctuates below the dollar, you reduce their number and vice versa. But each of these approaches has a problem. The first, fiat-backed, is highly centralized, you've got counterparty risk, and is exposed to all kinds of regulatory dangers. The second is very, very expensive and also partially centralized because you need oracles, but you also are spending, for example, with MakerDAO, $1.50 to create $1. Not a good deal. And the third is an amazing attempt to use just pure maths to create basically a distributed Federal Reserve, but it's a huge gamble, a very big experiment, and so we don't know if it's going to succeed. So what we're doing at Reserve is we're trying to help the ecosystem generally, and the way we're doing it is we're allowing people to generate all kinds of tokens in all kinds of ways which are supposed to represent stability and are fixed to dollars or euros, then to place them collectively into a smart contract and create a token which is going to represent across all the different blockchains, $1 or a euro or a pound or a yen, and also allow the holders to effectively pay someone else to take the risk, kind of like making a small interest payment, to take the risk of any one particular input into this basket failing. So that means that now, if this succeeds, what we hope to do is we hope to create a way for us collectively, instead of having to go to a central bank or a reserve, to create our own reserve, the people's reserve, for us to, in a decentralized way, through the efforts of many, seek to create dollars, euros, yen, and other major currencies on the blockchain, which can travel across blockchains and which will allow people to start using decentralized apps to start trading entirely on the blockchain without having to go through centralized exchanges, to make payments from the United States to Honduras in the currencies that they are familiar with, to basically reduce the massive frictions that people today have in adopting blockchain. This is a large project, and I'm very excited by it. I'm also excited not just because of the opportunity, but also because, you know, if it works, we're kind of going to screw the people who screwed my last business. So that said, we've managed to convince a number of the banks who are working with us and the financial institutions who are working with us to partner with us. And we're looking to create something that is going to be able to be generated by the many different efforts of people across the blockchain industry. And I think that is one of the most incredible things about this industry, right? The decentralization, at the very DNA of what we're trying to do is create collaboration and create something which is owned by the people, generated by the people, for the people. So maybe finally we'll have money by the people, of the people, for the people. That's our hope. Do I have time for a few questions?
Yes, of course, of course. Please, go ahead. Do we have the mic? Yes. Where's the question? Rodolfo. Wait for the mic, please. Wait for the mic.
What do you think of McAfee's declaration of currency independence that came out this week?
So actually, I don't know McAfee's declaration of independence. I don't follow McAfee that closely. But I assume, maybe tell me a little bit about it and I'll be able to respond.
It's modeled on the U.S. Declaration of Independence. It's a declaration of currency independence from the state, and he's declaring war on state currency.
Okay. So I think this is an idea that's been echoing in the blockchain world since Bitcoin, right? We've created an alternative, and some people have taken, the title of my talk is, I think it's Confessions of a Bitcoin Maximalist. I came to this out of the belief that if we had a people's money, that would be Bitcoin, and that would be independent. But I think that it's very valuable for us. The people in this room have probably adopted this idea. But right now, the entire industry is 5% ideologues, 95% speculators, and very little else. And we need to reach beyond the ideologues and the speculators. We need to reach to people who are interested in their everyday lives, who are looking for utility. And to do that, we need to be able to work in a way which is no friction, works with their habits and their understandings, and isn't going to radicalize them, at least not initially.
Rodolfo.
Can I ask a question back here, or is that right? Yeah. So couldn't agree more about the friction. Really love the talk. The question is sort of two parts. First is, how are you going to solve the fiat on-ramp problem? And then the second part of that is, how does that sort of contrast with or work with this notion of an unstoppable currency?
Right. Thanks. So the fiat on-ramp problem, just to give a quick overview, it's got a lot of pieces, but basically what I think you're referring to is this problem of getting fiat, right, dollars or euros, into the blockchain, or converting them today into Ether or Bitcoin. One of the reasons it's so difficult today is because the system is not designed to allow you to do that at all. But the system, for example, in Europe, we have something called e-money, which is exactly designed to allow a central issuer who has KYC'd, in other words, has the identifying information of their customers, to provide them with tokens, with digital tokens, representing funds that they have in a bank account. This is called e-money in Europe. It's called stored value in the US, and regulation exists for that. The problem is it's super centralized. So any particular issue can do this, and we could have 100 issuers tokenizing, and putting these records on the blockchain. That doesn't get us very far, because you can only convert out, or maybe even only hold these tokens if you are a customer of that institution. By taking a huge swath of these and having one in Argentina and one in China and one in Japan and one in Europe and one issuer in the United States, and being able to combine those into a basket to create one homogenized universal token representing the entire underlying, you suddenly have a dollar which is supposed to be like the dollar. Global, frictionless, can be used by anyone, anywhere, for any purpose. Anything from a retail payment to an institutional holder looking to hedge their portfolio. So I think the way we solve that is by working with the system and introducing decentralization on a higher level.
So you said that, right now you said one in Argentina, one. It's not for having several gateways that create tokens, but you expect to have like key gateways that hold also the real cash? I mean,
Yeah, I don't expect that will be the only way it works. I think already there are a number of gateways around the world who could easily do this. There are already e-money providers who are not in the blockchain space who could easily introduce themselves. So, for example, exchanges, Bitfinex have already launched their own coin, Tether. We could see other exchanges do the same. We could see e-money providers who are not in the space enter the space. And we could see people using more decentralized systems like MakerDAO, and introduce DAI into the baskets as well. And so what we're looking to do is create a platform which will allow a community to come together and say, we believe that the following coins are of sufficiently high quality to come into the baskets on our platform, but and allow anyone basically to create their own baskets in order to have these baskets interlinked and creating one unified dollar, one unified euro.
More questions?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
You give us an example, for example, from Tether, who are backed with a normal, the Fiat is backed with normal tokens and so on. And especially in Venezuela, they will launch the Pedro coin. And with that solution...
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
In Venezuela,
Yeah.
Maduro
Yeah.
launched the Pedro coin
Yeah.
and go then without having the problems with the sanctions and can finance his more or less dictatorship
Right.
again. So is that the way how crypto should be used by states?
So
I don't. I know it's controversial.
I think for me the answer is simply no. It's first of all, I don't think anyone in the room. I don't know anyone who owns a Petro coin. I don't know that they actually managed to sell anyone on the idea. But the Petro coin isn't at all what we're talking about. There's nobody in the world who uses it. So it's not a familiar coin. It's not reducing frictions, right? If somebody comes to you with the idea that you should use this dictator's token, right? This dictator's ERC20 token or whatever it is, that's not going to move the ball forward in terms of mainstreaming blockchain. The same actually goes for other, I think, more legitimate attempts. So like there are tokens out there that for example, track the price of gold or basically asset-backed with gold or with diamonds. I don't think that those are properly familiar coins or stable coins either, because for the mainstream, like the prism that I'm looking through is I'm asking myself, somebody who is disinterested, who has no interest in this space, how do we create enough utility and reduce friction enough that they still are going to want to use the tools? They're not going to want to use gold. Gold doesn't move us forward in that respect.
Okay, and one more question. For example, when every country will launch their own coin, like the Pedro, and it's not a dictatorship, like, for example, if we Germans say, for our cars, we accept now a special coin, and then you can trade that coin directly with other coins from other states, and therefore then we don't need any more such big banks, right?
Yes,
is that a solution in the future would be great, do you think?
For some people I've spoken to in the space, they say, the best thing that could happen is the central banks create their own cryptocurrencies. I'm not holding my breath. Traditionally speaking, the Federal Reserve and other central banks are not early adopters. I think we need to do it for ourselves, and then maybe if they want to join the party after, we've already set it up, then maybe that will happen. I'm not sure it's a good thing, I don't know, but we need to set up the rules, we need to set up the structure, and we need to do this for ourselves.
Great. Thank you so much. Edan will be around, so hopefully open for questions. But what might be interesting also for you